Before a man can conquer the world, he must conquer himself. But most never do. Not because they're incapable, but because they never declare war on what truly holds them back. Their own weakness. That voice in your head that says, "Play it safe." The hesitation that creeps in when it's time to speak up. The impulse to be liked, to be accepted, to be seen as good. Nietzsche didn't just talk about strength, he demanded it. But not physical dominance, not arrogance. He spoke of an inner power, forged in solitude, pain, and brutal honesty. But before we go deeper, write in the comments where you're watching this from. Let's see who's really paying attention. Because this message isn't for the comfortable. It's for the ones standing on this edge of something unfamiliar, staring down the parts of themselves they know they can't carry any longer. Modern life has done everything it can to kill this idea. It tells you to self-soothe instead of self-conquer. It tells you comfort is a right, that pain is a sign something's wrong. But Nietzsche saw it differently. He saw pain as a signal that you've reached the threshold of growth. He believed that everything great begins with a war, an inner revolt against who you are now in order to become who you could be. But instead of that war, most people choose distraction. They drown their instincts in dopamine and validation. They sell their time, attention, and soul just to avoid discomfort. And then they wonder why they feel powerless. You can't fix this by reading a quote. You can't heal it by journaling about your feelings. You fix it by turning inward and calling your weakness by name. You fix it by deciding, without excuse or delay, that from this moment on, you will no longer tolerate your own mediocrity. That's the first act of inner war. And until you make that decision, everything else, your goals, your mindset, your identity, is just decoration on a house that's already burning. You want to be powerful? Then stop negotiating with your weakness. Stop pretending it's your personality. Stop dressing it up as empathy, compassion, humility. Nietzsche didn't care about looking virtuous. He cared about becoming whole. And that wholeness only begins when you face the enemy inside and decide it's time to kill it. Most people have no idea how much their need to be liked is costing them. It sounds harmless, wanting to be seen, appreciated, accepted. But it's the first link in the chain that keeps you enslaved. Nietzsche called it herd morality, the instinct to conform, to behave, to not disturb the peace. And it makes sense. You've been trained from birth to obey this instinct. Praise and punishment taught you to be agreeable. Social media turned your self-worth into a scoreboard, and now you're trapped in the fear of being misunderstood, disliked, or, worst of all, forgotten. But here's the truth Nietzsche understood. If you want to be free, you must be willing to walk alone. You must detach from the opinions of others, from the comfort of approval, from the illusion that you owe anyone your silence, your truth, your potential. Because the man who cannot detach is the man who can be controlled. The moment someone knows you care what they think, they own you. Your movements, your choices, your voice, they all become shaped by their expectations. And here's what they never tell you. The people you fear disappointing, the ones whose approval you crave, are just as lost as you are. They're clinging to their own illusions. Their opinions don't come from clarity, but from fear, from insecurity, from the need to maintain their own fragile identity. So when you let them define you, you're not just being polite. You're letting the blind lead the blind. Detachment isn't apathy. It's precision. It's knowing when to care and when to cut loose. It's deciding that your energy, your vision, your mind, these are sacred, and not everyone gets access. Not everyone deserves a vote. Because when your identity is shaped by approval, it becomes hollow. It becomes whatever gets the most claps. But when it's shaped by detachment, it becomes sharp, pure, unstoppable. So the next time you feel that itch to explain yourself, to shrink yourself, to soften your truth so it doesn't upset someone else, pause. Ask yourself, who am I really serving here? Them, or the lie I was told about needing their acceptance? Then walk away, in silence, in strength, in detachment. That's where the war is won. Emotional debt is the silent killer of potential. It doesn't look like a threat. It looks like being the bigger person. It looks like keeping the peace. It looks like staying in touch with people who drain you, listening to problems that aren't yours, and sacrificing your time, energy, and truth to avoid conflict. But behind that smile, behind every polite nod and every, "It's fine, don't worry about it," you are racking up a bill, one that costs you your power. Nietzsche understood this long before we had the words for it. He warned us that morality, especially the kind rooted in guilt and obligation, was often nothing more than a tool for the weak to control the strong, not with force, but with shame. The moment someone knows you feel guilty for having boundaries, they've already won. Because now, your goodness becomes your cage. Think about it. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? How often have you let something slide, not because you were okay with it, but because you didn't want to be seen as rude, difficult, selfish? That's not kindness. That's fear dressed up as virtue. And the more you do it, the more you become indebted. To everyone but yourself. You start owing people explanations, owing them your time, your loyalty, your silence, even your forgiveness. And what happens when you finally reach your limit? They call you cold, selfish, unrecognizable, because your identity was never really yours. It was the product of emotional manipulation, crafted over time, shaped by what others needed from you, until you couldn't tell where their expectations ended and your truth began. Breaking free from this isn't easy. Because the debt is psychological. You've been taught that your worth comes from being useful, agreeable, low maintenance. So when you finally say no, when you detach, it feels like betrayal. But it's not. It's recovery. It's remembering who you were before you owed everyone something. Freedom begins with a clean slate, not just with others, but with yourself. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe anyone your explanation. You don't owe anyone the old version of you. Cut the ties. Clear the debt. Because the moment you stop carrying everyone else's burdens, you'll realize you were never weak. You were just weighed down by what was never yours to hold. There's a shift that happens when you stop explaining yourself. When you stop offering emotional discounts to people who never paid full price for your presence. That shift is called power, and it begins the moment you choose to become unreachable. Not in a cruel, arrogant way, but in a deliberate, disciplined way. Because what most people call connection is often just access. And when you cut that access, the mask falls. Nietzsche didn't believe in pleasing the herd. He believed in transcending it. He warned us that the masses don't fear monsters. They fear individuals who no longer need their approval. The moment you stop trying to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you, you break a centuries-old contract. The unspoken agreement that says you must shrink yourself to fit the collective mood. Becoming unreachable doesn't mean disappearing. It means becoming immune. Immune to manipulation, immune to guilt, immune to the exhausting game of trying to keep everyone comfortable at the expense of your own clarity. It means no longer being the emotional caretaker for people who never once asked how you're doing. It means ignoring the bait. The comment designed to provoke you, the silence meant to punish you, the drama meant to pull you back into old roles. When you stop reacting, you stop being predictable. And when you're no longer predictable, you're no longer controllable. There's strength in mystery, in silence, in distance. Not because you're hiding, but because you've realized not everyone deserves to know who you are becoming. Not everyone deserves a front row seat to your evolution. And not everyone should have access to your energy, your time, or your attention just because they demand it. When you become unreachable, the right people find a way. The wrong ones expose themselves. And you, finally, have room to breathe, to think, to grow without surveillance. Because you are no longer in service to the emotional needs of people who never saw you as more than a function. Let the calls go unanswered. Let the texts sit unread. Let the world wonder what you're doing. That's not isolation. That's liberation. That's Nietzsche's version of power. Not dominance, but detachment. Not noise, but sovereignty. People fear what they can no longer control, and nothing is more terrifying to someone who feeds off your emotional labor than the moment you decide you're done. Not loud, not messy, just done. When you no longer fight, explain, or justify, when you simply walk away without a backward glance, you don't just leave the relationship. You leave their entire illusion in ruins. Nietzsche understood that strength isn't always expressed in battle. It's often revealed in refusal. Refusal to be baited. Refusal to be drained. Refusal to keep bleeding for someone who calls it love while they watch you wither. The will to power isn't about controlling others. It's about mastering yourself. And self-mastery means knowing when to close the door, lock it, and walk down a different path. People will call you cold for walking away. They'll say you changed. They'll say you owe them one last conversation, one last explanation, one last chance. But here's the truth. They're not asking for closure. They're asking for access. They want one more opportunity to reset the game, to guilt you, charm you, confuse you, just enough to pull you back into orbit. And when you refuse to give it, their fear turns to rage. This is how you know the mask is slipping. The person who once praised your sensitivity will now call you selfish. The one who admired your strength will now claim you're cruel. But don't flinch. Don't explain. Don't engage. Because what they're really mourning isn't the relationship. It's the loss of control. Freedom doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence, accusations, smears. But beneath that noise is something far more powerful. Peace. Peace that comes from no longer being held emotionally hostage by people who only loved you when you were easy to use. When you walk away, not to prove anything, but because your soul has outgrown the game, you become a mirror, one they can't stand to look into. Because your absence says what your words never could. I'm not afraid of losing you. I'm afraid of losing myself. And I won't do that anymore. There's a particular kind of power that doesn't need to be loud, aggressive, or dramatic. It just is. It walks into the room with calm eyes and no need to prove anything. That power is emotional detachment. And it terrifies manipulators, narcissists, and anyone who relies on your predictability to control you. Because once they can no longer read you, they can no longer use you. Nietzsche understood that the most dangerous man isn't the one who lashes out. It's the one who doesn't react, the one who listens without responding, the one who observes without explaining. When you become emotionally detached, not numb, not dead inside, but clear, calm, and self-possessed, you break the entire script they've built around you. They don't know what to say. They don't know what works anymore. Every guilt trip, every backhanded compliment, every carefully crafted insult falls flat because you've stepped outside the play. You've stopped giving them a role in your inner world. Most people are easy to manipulate because they're easy to predict. They want to be liked. They want to be understood. They want to make things right. But when you stop needing that, when your peace becomes more valuable than being liked, something shifts. You start to operate from a different level. You don't rise to provocations. You don't offer your story as a defense. You let people misunderstand you, judge you, spin their narratives, and you stay silent. And this silence, this refusal to feed the performance, drives them mad. Not because you're doing something to them, but because you've stopped doing anything at all. You've stopped reacting. And that means they no longer exist in the role they wrote for themselves. Without your energy, without your participation, their identity crumbles. The goal isn't to become cold, it's to become sovereign, so that your emotional state is no longer at the mercy of anyone else's chaos, so that when someone tries to bait you, you don't bite, you watch. And in that space between reaction and response, you reclaim everything you once gave away. This is the beginning of true strength, when you become untouchable, not because you're hard, but because you've become whole. When you've stopped trying to fix, argue, prove, or explain, what's left? Disengagement, not as a tactic, but as a state of being. It's what comes after you've detached, after you've observed enough to see that certain people don't want peace. They want control. They don't want understanding. They want access. They don't want resolution. They want the cycle to continue because it's the only place they feel powerful. And once you realize this, you stop arguing and start exiting. Nietzsche believed that the highest expression of strength wasn't found in dominance, but in indifference to dominance. Walking away without a word, without a scene, without even the need to be understood, is the final assertion of your autonomy. Because nothing confuses a manipulator more than silence. Nothing enrages someone trying to control you more than indifference. And nothing frees you faster than refusing to perform. Most people stay too long in conversations that aren't conversations, relationships that are really negotiations, and roles that are just cages decorated with fake affection. But the truth is this: the more you engage with someone who profits from your emotional investment, the more power you give them. You keep trying to get closure, clarity, or compassion from someone who never had it to give. And in that effort, you bleed energy. You erode your self-trust. You stay stuck in a story that was never yours to begin with. Disengagement isn't weakness. It's wisdom. It's saying, I see exactly what this is, and I don't need to stay in it to prove that I see it. It's the quiet reclaiming of your power, done not with dramatic exits, but with unshakable silence. You don't slam the door. You simply stop opening it. You stop explaining yourself. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop being available for dynamics that dishonor you. And suddenly, the game collapses. The manipulator, the narcissist, the emotional puppeteer, they're left standing on an empty stage, confused why the show won't go on. But you're gone. Not angry, not bitter, just gone. This is what emotional detachment makes possible. Not just inner strength, but the freedom to leave without residue, to walk away without dragging the wreckage behind you, and to know deep in your bones that not everything that wants your attention deserves your presence. Once you've detached, once you've stopped performing and walked away from the stage that was never yours, you step into something rare. Self-possession, not the performance of confidence, not arrogance, not superiority, but true, rooted, self-anchored presence. This is the state Nietzsche envisioned when he spoke of the Übermensch, not a tyrant, but a human who creates value from within. Someone who doesn't need validation, applause, or followers to feel real. This is where your power consolidates. No longer leaking energy into broken systems, desperate dynamics, or approval-seeking loops. Your strength starts returning to you. You're not drained by conversations that go nowhere because you don't enter them. You're not rattled by people's projections because you don't carry the need to be seen a certain way. You're not hooked by guilt because you've made peace with your choices. And that peace? It's magnetic. It's the reason the same people who tried to break you will later try to get close again. Not out of love, but curiosity. They want to know how you did it, how you stopped needing them, how you walked away without turning bitter. But you're not here to explain anymore. You're not here to fix, save, or even inspire. You're here to live. That's the difference. The old version of you wanted to be understood. The new version is okay being misunderstood because it no longer defines your worth. The old version was controlled by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being disliked, fear of disappointing people who were never invested in your growth. But this version? It lives beyond fear. It's no longer afraid of silence, distance, or disapproval, because it's built on something deeper than acceptance. It's built on truth. And when you build your life from that place, you become untouchable. Not because no one can harm you, but because nothing outside you can unmake you. That is the rise of the self. That is the end of the performance. That is your real beginning. When you finally detach from the illusions, the need for approval, the craving for validation, the fear of rejection, you start to recognize a deeper truth. Freedom is not given. It's taken. It's reclaimed. And the price is always the same. Your willingness to stop asking for permission to exist on your own terms. This kind of freedom doesn't fit in conversations meant to keep you small. It doesn't need to explain itself to people who never saw you clearly to begin with. It doesn't wait for consensus, applause, or understanding. It moves in silence, walks with conviction, and speaks only when there's something real to say. Most people won't understand it. That's the point. Because their sense of safety is still tied to how well they fit in, how well they're liked, how obedient they are to the rules of a world that benefits from their compliance. Your detachment disrupts that. It forces a confrontation they're not ready for. The idea that someone can walk away, not in anger, not in fear, but in total clarity. Nietzsche understood that to become truly free, you must be willing to face the discomfort of solitude. Because the moment you no longer rely on the group to define you, you exit the herd. And with that exit comes a responsibility. To create meaning, to build structure, to carry your own truth without leaning on theirs. It's terrifying at first, but it's also the only path worth walking. This isn't about rebellion for its own sake. It's not about being contrarian or difficult. It's about living with integrity, even when no one claps for it. It's about doing what's right for your soul, even if it disappoints every expectation placed upon you. It's about letting the mask fall, letting the roles die, and letting yourself become. This freedom doesn't look like fireworks. It looks like saying no without guilt. It looks like walking away without rage. It looks like waking up in the morning and not needing the world to reflect your worth back to you. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be free. And that begins the moment you stop waiting for permission to be yourself. There comes a moment when you stop trying to fix the world around you and start building the world within you. Not because you've given up, but because you've finally understood the truth. the more energy you spend trying to be enough for others, the further you drift from yourself. Emotional detachment is not apathy. It's precision. It's choosing not to bleed for people who'd watch you die. It's refusing to argue with those committed to misunderstanding you. And it's walking away, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown the need to prove your strength. This is the shift Nietzsche spoke of, not in theory, but in practice. It's the transformation from being a reaction to being a force. From echoing the noise of others to becoming your own voice, loud or quiet, but unmistakably yours. You begin to live with a different rhythm, one that isn't dictated by shame, guilt, or the fear of being alone, one that moves with intention, not impulse. People will accuse you of being distant, cold, arrogant. Let them, because they don't see the storm you've survived to earn this stillness. They don't understand what it took to stand here unshaken. Your silence will offend them. Your peace will disturb them. And your refusal to explain will drive them mad. But that's how you know you're doing it right. The ones who were never meant to meet your truth will try to reduce it to rebellion. But the ones who've walked through their own fire will recognize it for what it really is. Liberation. A kind of internal sovereignty no one can take. A fire that burns quietly but cannot be extinguished. Emotional detachment isn't an end. It's a beginning. It's not about closing off. It's about choosing where your energy goes and who gets to stand close enough to feel your warmth. It's about building a life that reflects who you are, not one that pleases those who never truly saw you. So no, you're not too much. You're not too distant. You're not broken. You're becoming. And the more you detach from the noise, the more clearly you'll hear your own voice. That voice is your compass. Let it lead you. Because the world doesn't need another person trying to fit in. It needs someone brave enough to stand out, unapologetically, completely, and free.